The billionaire stood at his window, watching the new maid walk up the gravel path. She was the ninth one this year. They never lasted. They always got curious about the locked east wing, about the sounds, about the word no one was allowed to mention. But this one didn't just get curious. She kicked the door open, and nothing was ever the same. The Kane estate stretched across 12 acres of manicured silence, every hedge trimmed with military precision, every window gleaming like polished ice, beautiful and suffocating. A masterpiece no one was allowed to truly see. Dominic "Dommy" Kane stood at his third-floor window, jaw clenched, watching the young woman below. Her worn sneakers crunched against stones that cost more than her monthly rent. She had no idea what she was walking into. Keisha Monroe was 27, exhausted but unbroken. She'd raised her disabled brother alone after their mother vanished. She'd worked jobs that treated her like furniture. She'd learned that rich people saw through you, not at you. The trick was to stay invisible. But staying invisible required ignoring things, and Keisha had never been good at that. The Kane estate paid triple the standard rate. That alone should have been a warning. But her brother Marcus needed a specialist, and desperation made you blind to red flags. The head housekeeper gave her 3 rules. Never enter the East Wing, never ask questions about the family, never stay past dark. Keisha nodded, memorized, filed away. That night, lying in the servants' quarters, she heard it, crying, soft, broken, human, coming from somewhere it shouldn't exist. Dommy heard it too. He always did. He stood outside the East Wing door, palm flat against the wood, listening to his son's sobs. The boy he'd locked away 7 years ago after the accident that killed his wife and shattered everything he thought he understood about protection. I'm protecting him, Dommy told himself at 3 in the morning, when the crying started and he couldn't make himself open the door. The crying stopped. Dommy exhaled. He walked away. He always walked away. But Keisha Monroe was not Dominic Kane. So when she heard that crying for the 3rd night in a row, when she stood outside that locked door with her hand on the handle, she made a choice that would change 3 lives forever. What was billionaire Dominic Kane hiding in his own home? And why did he lock his only son away from the world? Before we go any further, I need to know, have you ever refused to look away from something everyone else ignored? Have you ever fought for someone the world forgot? If that's you, if you believe some rules are meant to be broken, then you're in the right place. Subscribe and join a community that believes every person deserves to be seen. Now, let's find out what's behind that locked door. Now let's get back to the story. Keisha's interview. You had lasted exactly 4 minutes. She'd been escorted through hallways that smelled like lemon polish and old money, past rooms she wasn't allowed to look into, up a staircase wider than her entire apartment. The butler, gray-haired, stone-faced, had knocked twice on a heavy oak door, then disappeared like smoke. Dominic Kane didn't look up when she entered. He sat behind a desk the size of a small car, signing documents with the mechanical precision of someone who'd forgotten what his own signature meant. His suit probably cost more than 6 months of Marcus's physical therapy. "Miss Monroe," he said, not a question, a statement. He still hadn't looked at her. "Yes, sir." "You've worked in 5 households in 3 years." He flipped a page. Her entire life reduced to bullet points. "None of your references mention why you left." "I left when the work ended, sir." "Or when you got curious." Finally, he looked up. His eyes were cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that saw through people, not at them. "This estate has rules, Miss Monroe, simple rules. You clean, you cook, you stay invisible. Can you do that?" Keisha thought of Marcus in that state facility with the flickering lights and the nurses who forgot his name. She thought of the bills stacked on her kitchen counter like a house of cards about to collapse. "Yes, sir." "The East Wing is off limits, always, no exceptions. His jaw tightened. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. You start today. The interview was over. She'd been hired and dismissed in the same breath. The other staff kept their distance. Keisha spent her first morning scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, dusting shelves that held nothing, moving through rooms designed to look lived in but felt like museum exhibits. The estate was massive, empty. Every sound echoed. It wasn't until lunch, a silent affair in the servants' kitchen, that anyone spoke to her. The cook, a heavy-set woman named Agnes, slid a plate of food across the table. You met him then? Mr. Kane? Keisha nodded. Briefly. Consider yourself lucky. Brief is best. Agnes glanced toward the hallway, then lowered her voice. You'll do fine here if you remember three things. Don't ask, don't look, don't last. Don't last? No one does. A younger maid, couldn't have been more than 19, picked at her sandwich without eating. You're the 9th this year. Keisha remembered what the butler had said during her tour. We've had some turnover recently. Why? Keisha asked. Agnes and the younger maid exchanged a look, the kind of look that said too much and nothing at all. The sounds, the younger maid whispered. At night, from the east wing. What kind of sounds? Agnes stood abruptly, her chair scraping against tile. You heard Mr. Kane. East wing's off limits. That means the sounds are too. She picked up her plate, hands shaking slightly. Do your job. Keep your head down. Maybe you'll make it a month. The younger maid leaned closer after Agnes left. She's right, you know, about not asking. The last girl, she got curious, started poking around. She didn't even make it 2 weeks. What happened to her? She left in the middle of the night, didn't even pack. The girl's eyes darted to the window, toward the east wing. Said she couldn't stay in a house that felt wrong. Night fell like a curtain. Keisha lay in her small room in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling. The estate settled around her, old wood creaking, pipes groaning, the wind testing the windows. Then she heard it, crying, soft, broken, distant but distinct, coming from somewhere deep in the house, somewhere she wasn't allowed to go. Keisha sat up, heart pounding. Don't ask, don't look, don't last. She should stay in bed. Follow the rules, ignore it like everyone else. But that sound, she knew that sound. She'd heard it from Marcus when he was younger, when the pain was bad and he thought no one was listening. It was the sound of someone who'd given up on being heard. Keisha stood. Her hand found the doorknob. You clean, you cook, you stay invisible. She opened the door. The hallway stretched before her, dark and silent, except for that crying. It pulled at something deep in her chest, something that had never learned to look away. She took one step, then another. Ahead, at the end of a forbidden corridor, a door stood locked, and behind it someone was breaking. The first night, Keisha stood at the locked door for 3 minutes before turning back. The second night, she made it as far as touching the handle. Her fingers had brushed cold brass before fear pulled her away. But the third night, the crying was different. Desperate, raw. The sound of someone who'd forgotten anyone could hear them. Keisha stood in the darkness of the forbidden corridor, her nightgown thin against the cold, her bare feet silent on marble floors. Every logical part of her brain screamed to go back. She'd lose this job. She needed this job. Marcus needed this job. But that crying, she'd heard it before, in hospital rooms, in the care facility where she'd left her brother because she couldn't afford to keep him home. The sound of isolation so deep it became a physical thing, pressing down on your chest until you couldn't breathe. Her hand shook as she pulled 2 hairpins from her braid. Don't ask, don't look, don't last. The lock was old, expensive but not complicated. She'd learned to pick locks at 16 when their mother left and the landlord kept forgetting to fix the broken bathroom door. Survival taught you strange skills. The pin slipped. Her hands were shaking too hard. She took a breath, steadied herself, tried again. Click. The sound was impossibly loud in the silence. Keisha froze. Certain alarms would scream, that Dami would appear like a ghost, that she'd be thrown out into the night with nothing. But nothing happened, just that crying. Closer now. She pushed the door open. The room was enormous and nearly empty. Heavy curtains blocked every window. A single lamp in the corner cast more shadow than light. The air smelled stale, like a place that had been sealed off from the world for too long. And in the center of it all, sitting in a wheelchair, was a young man, 19, maybe 20. His body was twisted in ways bodies shouldn't twist, his head tilted at an angle that looked painful. His hands gripped the armrest like he was holding on to the only solid thing in his world. He looked up when the door opened and froze. His eyes went wide, not with hope, but with terror, like he expected her to hurt him. Or worse, to leave. Keisha's throat tightened. This is what Dami was hiding. Not a monster, not a scandal. A boy. Just a boy. She could leave, close the door, pretend she never saw, keep her job, keep her life simple. But she'd spent her whole life watching people look away from Marcus, from the uncomfortable, from the inconvenient. She'd sworn she'd never be one of them. Keisha stepped inside, closed the door behind her. The young man made a sound, half gasp, half sob. His body tensed like he was preparing for something terrible. "Hi," Keisha said softly. She didn't move closer, didn't crowd him, just sat down on the floor, right there by the door, making herself small, non-threatening, present. "I'm Keisha." He stared at her. His breathing was rapid, panicked. "I heard you crying," she continued, keeping her voice low and calm, the way she used to talk to Marcus during his worst episodes. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." The young man's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He was trying to speak, she realized, struggling with it. She waited. No rushing, no finishing his sentences, no treating him like he was broken, just waiting. Finally, after what felt like forever, he made a sound, rough, unpracticed, like vocal cords that hadn't been used for anything but crying in years. Jay. His whole body shook with the effort. Jolly. The name came out cracked and small, but it came out. Keisha felt something break open in her chest. "Jolly," she repeated, letting him hear his own name said gently, with respect, like it mattered. "That's a good name." His eyes filled with tears, not sad tears, something else, something that looked almost like relief. He was staring at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. And maybe, Keisha thought with dawning horror, she was. How long has he been alone in here? How long since someone sat with him? Spoke to him like a person? She looked around the room again, at the curtains blocking out the sun, at the emptiness, at the wheelchair position where no one would ever see him from the door. "You haven't been spoken to in years, have you?" she whispered. Jolly's chin trembled. He shook his head. Just once. But it was enough. Keisha pulled her knees to her chest, settled against the wall, and made a decision that would change everything. "Well, she said quietly, I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere." Keisha returned the next night, and the night after that. She moved through the dark hallways like a ghost, memorizing which floorboards creaked, which doors had squeaky hinges, which shadows offered the best cover. The estate slept around her, but she stayed awake, waiting for the moment when she could slip away unnoticed. Every night she picked that same lock. Every night Jolly was waiting. The first few visits, he just stared, like he was testing whether she was real, whether she'd disappear if he blinked too hard. But slowly something shifted. His shoulders relaxed when she entered. His breathing steadied. He started watching the door before she arrived, as if he could sense her coming. On the fourth night, Keisha brought a book. "My brother loved this one," she said, settling onto the floor beside his wheelchair. "It's about a boy who builds a rocket ship out of junk and flies to the moon." Jolly's eyes tracked the worn cover. His fingers twitched. She read aloud, her voice filling the stale silence that had lived in this room for 7 years. At first, she wasn't sure he was listening. But then she noticed the way he leaned forward during the exciting parts, the way his breath caught during moments of danger. He was hungry for this, starving for it. On the sixth night, she opened the curtains. Moonlight spilled across the floor like water, painting everything silver. Jolly made a sharp sound, shock, not pain, and turned his face toward the window, toward light he hadn't seen in years. Keisha watched tears stream down his cheeks. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. He nodded, slowly, then looked at her with something that might have been gratitude or might have been disbelief that someone cared enough to show him the moon. Jolly began to change. His eyes, once dull and distant, sharpened, focused. He started trying to communicate, not just with sounds, but with intention. He'd point at the book when he wanted her to read, touch his chest when he was trying to say his own name, reach toward the window when he wanted her to open the curtains wider. Keisha taught him words the way she'd once taught Marcus, patiently, without pity, treating every attempt like the victory it was. "Window," Jolie managed one night, the syllables fighting their way out. "Yes," Keisha grinning. "Window, you did it, Jolly." He smiled, actually smiled. The expression looked unpracticed, like muscles remembering a movement they'd almost forgotten. She brought him real food, not the bland, cold meals someone left on a tray outside his door. Cookies from the kitchen, fresh fruit, a sandwich she'd made herself. He ate slowly, savoring every bite like it was the first good thing he'd tasted in years. Maybe it was, and for the first time since she had met him, Jolly laughed. It was a small sound, broken and rusty, but it was joy, pure, unguarded joy. Keisha felt something fierce bloom in her chest, protective, defiant. No one should be this grateful for basic human kindness. The staff noticed. "The East Wings have been quiet lately," Agnes remarked one morning. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. The younger maid nodded. "No sounds, not for almost a week." "That's good, isn't it?" Keisha asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Agnes didn't answer, just studied Keisha like she was a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Dami noticed too. He stood in his office, staring at the East Wing from his window. Something was different, wrong. The air felt shifted, like someone had moved furniture in a familiar room. He pulled up the security footage. The cameras didn't cover inside Jolly's room. He'd made sure of that years ago, unable to bear watching his son's isolation on a screen. But they covered the hallway, the door. He scrolled back. 1 day, 2 days, a week. Then he saw it. A figure, small, female, moving through the corridor at 2 in the morning, stopping at Jolly's door, picking the lock, going inside. Dami's blood went cold. He fast-forwarded. She came back again and again, every night for over a week. He switched to the exterior cameras, the ones that caught slivers of the room when the door opened. And there, in a fragment of footage, he saw something that stopped his heart. Keisha, sitting on the floor beside Jolie's wheelchair, reading to him, and Jolly, his son, his broken, hidden son, was leaning forward, listening, engaged, smiling. Dami's hands clenched into fists. Rage flooded through him first, hot and immediate. She'd broken the most sacred rule, invaded the one place that was supposed to remain untouched. But beneath the rage was something else, fear. And beneath the fear, something he couldn't name. something that looked almost like shame. Because in that grainy footage, his son looked more alive than Dami had seen him in 7 years. And a stranger, a maid he'd hired 3 weeks ago, had done what he never could. She'd made Jolly smile. The summons came at dawn, a sharp knock on Keisha's door. The butler's expressionless face. "Mr. Kane wants to see you, now." Her stomach dropped. He knows. She dressed quickly, her hands trembling as she buttoned her uniform. Every instinct screamed to run, grab her bag, disappear before he could destroy her. But running meant leaving Jolly alone again. And she'd promised. "I'm not going anywhere." The walk to Dami's study felt like a march to execution. He was standing when she entered, his back to her, staring out the window. The morning light made him look carved from stone. "Close the door," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that preceded earthquakes. Keisha closed it. He turned, his eyes were ice. "You had one job, Miss Monroe." Each word was precise, surgical. "One, stay away from that wing." "Mr. Kane, I have security footage of you entering my son's room every night. For 2 weeks, he stepped closer, breaking locks, violating direct orders, invading the privacy of a vulnerable person who cannot consent to your presence." Keisha's breath caught. He was framing this as protection, as if she were the danger. "He's not a prisoner," she said quietly. "You know nothing about my son." "I know he's alone." Her voice grew stronger. "I know he's scared. I know he thinks you hate him." Dami's jaw clenched. "How dare you? When's the last time you sat with him? Talked to him? Looked at him?" "I am protecting him." "From what?" Keisha took a step forward. "The world or yourself?" Something flickered across Dami's face, raw, wounded. Then the ice returned, colder than before. "You're fired." He moved toward his desk, reaching for the phone. "I want you off this property within the hour. If you speak to anyone about what you've seen, I will destroy you. Legally, financially, completely." Keisha felt the floor drop out from under her. Marcus, the bills, everything. But then she heard it, a sound from the doorway. Both of them turned. Jolly sat in his wheelchair just outside the study, chest heaving like he'd wheeled himself across the entire estate. His face was flushed, determined, terrified. Dami went pale. "Julian, go back to Key." Jolly's whole body shook with effort. His hands gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles went white. "Keisha." The room went silent. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. Dami stood frozen, the phone still in his hand. Jolly looked at his father, really looked at him, for the first time in years. And with everything he had, with every ounce of strength in his broken body, he forced out one more word: "Stay." The word hung in the air like a prayer. Dami's hand trembled. The phone slipped from his fingers, clattering against the desk. His son had spoken. After years of silence, after years of isolation, Jolly had fought his way out of that locked room, wheeled himself through forbidden hallways, and spoken. For her. Keisha watched Dami's face, watched rage roar with shock, denial crash against something that looked almost like heartbreak, because the truth was undeniable now. A stranger had done in 2 weeks what he hadn't done in 7 years. She'd reached his son, and Jolly, his silent, hidden, forgotten son, had chosen her. Dami couldn't move. He stood in the center of his study, staring at his son, at Jolly, who'd wheeled himself across the estate, who'd spoken, who'd chosen, and felt the carefully constructed walls he'd built begin to crumble. Keisha moved first. She crossed to Jolly, knelt beside his wheelchair, and took his trembling hand. "You were so brave," she whispered. Jolly's eyes never left his father's face. The silence stretched, unbearable. Finally, Dami's voice came out hoarse, broken. "Julian, go back to your room." "No." Keisha stood. He stays. You don't give orders in my house. Then fire me. Call security. Do whatever you need to do. Her voice was steady, fearless. But he deserves to hear this conversation. He deserves to be treated like a person, not a secret. Dami's hands clenched into fists. You know nothing about what he deserves. Then tell me. She didn't back down. Tell me why you locked your own son away for 7 years. I was protecting him. From what? From everything. The words exploded out of him, raw, uncontrolled. From a world that would have called him broken. From people who would have pitied him, photographed him, turned him into a spectacle. From, his voice cracked. From me. Keisha went still. Dami turned away, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. There was an accident. 7 years ago, I was driving. His breath shuddered. It was raining. The roads were slick. I took a turn too fast and he stopped, swallowed. My wife died on impact. Julian survived, but he gestured vaguely toward his son. The doctors said he'd never be the same. And they were right. I destroyed him. I killed her, and His voice broke completely. I couldn't look at him without seeing what I'd done. The room fell silent except for Jolie's quiet breathing. So you hid him, Keisha said softly. You told yourself it was protection. But really you were hiding from your own guilt, and he's been paying for it ever since. Dami spun around, rage flashing across his face. You have no right. I raised my younger brother alone after our mother abandoned us. Keisha's voice was steady, strong. He's disabled. He's in a care facility I can barely afford. And I spent years watching people decide he was too broken to love, too inconvenient to acknowledge. She took a step closer. I know what it looks like when someone chooses their own comfort over another person's humanity. That's not what When's the last time you actually looked at your son? She didn't let him finish. Not checked on him through staff reports, not watched him through cameras, really looked at him, sat with him, talked to him. Dami's mouth opened, closed. No answer came, because there was no answer. I thought so. Keisha's voice softened. You've been so busy protecting him from the world, you never noticed you became the thing he needed protection from. The words hit like a physical blow. Dami looked at Jolie, really looked, and saw his son's face for the first time in years. Saw the fear there, the loneliness, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, his father didn't hate him. And Dami understood. He'd built a prison. Not for protection, for penance. And Jolie had been serving his sentence. I don't know how to fix this, Dami whispered. The confession felt like surrender. Keisha's expression softened. You start by trying. That's all. Just try. Let me ask you something. Do you think people can change? Do you believe someone who's caused harm, even unintentionally, can earn forgiveness? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to hear your thoughts. And if this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the stories that break us open are the ones that heal us. Okay, let's keep going. That evening, Dami stood outside Jolie's door for 10 minutes before he could make himself knock. His hand hovered over the wood, the same wood he'd pressed his palm against countless nights, listening to his son cry, never opening it, never going in. He knocked, soft, uncertain. No answer. Of course not. He opened the door. The room was different. The curtains were open, moonlight spilling across the floor. A book lay on the small table beside the wheelchair. The air smelled less stale, like someone had been breathing life back into this tomb. Jolie sat by the window, his silhouette framed in silver light. When he heard the door, he turned and flinched. The movement was small, instinctive. The reflexive recoil of someone expecting pain. Dami froze. My own son is terrified of me. The realization hit like a punch to the chest. He told himself for 7 years that isolation was safety, that distance was protection. But standing here watching his son shrink away from him, he understood the truth. He was the monster in this story. Julian, he said quietly, his voice shook. May I come in? Jolly stared, eyes wide, confused, like he couldn't quite believe his father was asking permission to enter a room he owned. Slowly, Jolly nodded. Dami stepped inside, closed the door, and for the first time in 7 years, he didn't leave. He looked around, really looked, at the space he designed to be comfortable but had become a cell, at the wheelchair positioned where no sunlight reached, at the books on the shelf, untouched, spines uncracked, at the son he'd abandoned while pretending to protect. The words caught in his throat. He'd commanded boardrooms, negotiated billion-dollar deals, controlled entire markets with his voice. But here, now, he had no idea what to say. He crossed the room, pulled a chair close to the wheelchair, not too close, giving Jolly space, and sat. Jolly watched him like a wild animal watching a trap. Julian. Dami's hands trembled. He clasped them together to keep them still. I'm sorry. 2 words, completely inadequate, but they were all he had. Jolly's expression shifted. The fear didn't leave, but something else crept in beneath it. Uncertainty, maybe the smallest seed of hope. I thought I was protecting you, Dami continued, his voice breaking. But I wasn't. I was hiding. From what I'd done, from what I couldn't fix. And you... He stopped, breathed. You paid the price for my cowardice. Jolly's chin trembled. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Jolly did something Dami hadn't expected. He looked at him, really looked. Not with fear, not with hope. Just looking. Seeing his father as a person, flawed, broken, trying. It was more than Dami deserved. From the doorway, Keisha watched in silence. This was what she'd fought for. Not her job, not her safety. This. A father and son in the same room trying to bridge 7 years of silence. Dami noticed the book on the table. His throat tightened when he recognized it. One he used to read to Jolly when he was small. Before the accident. Before everything shattered. Would you... He picked it up with shaking hands. Would you like me to read to you? Jolly hesitated, then slowly nodded. Dami opened the book. The pages were worn, loved. Keisha had been reading this to him. A stranger had given his son something he'd forgotten to provide. Stories, presence, care. He began to read, his voice rough and unpracticed. He stumbled over words he had once known by heart. His hand shook so badly he almost dropped the book twice. But he didn't stop. Jolly listened, and slowly, so slowly, Dami almost missed it. His son's shoulders began to relax. After 3 pages, Dami's voice broke completely. I don't know how to do this. You just started, Keisha said softly from the doorway. That's how. Dami looked at her, then at his son, and kept reading. The photograph appeared on every tabloid by morning. A grainy, long-distance shot taken through Julie's window. Him in his wheelchair, alone in the dark. The headline screamed across every news site, every social media platform, every television screen. Billionaire's secret shame. Disabled son hidden for years. Dami's phone exploded with calls before dawn. His publicist. His lawyers. Board members demanding emergency meetings. The media had surrounded the estate like wolves circling wounded prey. Cameras aimed at every window. Reporters shouting questions at the gates. Mr. Kane, is it true you've been hiding your son? How long has he been locked away? Do you consider him an embarrassment to your family name? Inside the mansion, chaos reigned. Dami's advisors filled his study, all talking at once. Damage control, legal action. Spin strategies. Deny everything, his lead attorney said, pacing. Claim the photo is fabricated. Deep fake technology. We sue for defamation and we need to identify the leak, his head of security interrupted. Likely a disgruntled former employee. We find them, we destroy their credibility before contain the narrative, his publicist added. Control the story. Medical privacy laws protect you here. We release a statement, minimal details, maximum sympathy, and we shut this down. Dami stood at the window watching the media circus below. His jaw was set, his voice cold and mechanical. We contain this. We control the narrative. The old patterns, the familiar walls, safety through silence. You're doing it again. Everyone turned. Keisha stood in the doorway, her expression fierce, hiding, controlling. When does it stop? Miss Monroe, this is a private meeting, the publicist began. Get out, Dami said quietly. Excuse me? Everyone, out, now. The advisors exchanged glances, then filed out reluctantly. The door closed. Keisha stepped closer. You were making progress. You were trying. And the second things get hard, you retreat into the same prison that destroyed you both. You don't understand. I understand that you're terrified. Her voice softened. I understand that facing the world feels impossible. But hiding Welly again won't protect him. It'll just prove to him that he was right all along. Right about what? That he's your shame. The words landed like a blow. Dami's hands clenched. He's not. A sound from the hallway cut him off. Crying, harsh and broken. They both ran. They found Jolie in his room, hunched over in his wheelchair, body shaking with sobs. A tablet lay on the floor. He'd seen the headlines, the photographs, the words, secret shame, hidden embarrassment. Jolie, Keisha breathed, rushing to his side. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. His voice came out strangled, each word a fight. Daddy hates me because I'm broken. Keisha's heart shattered. She knelt before him, taking his trembling hands in hers. No, listen to me, Jolie. You are not broken. You are not a shame. You are not the problem. The news, they said, they're wrong. She squeezed his hands gently. Your daddy is broken. He's been broken for 7 years, but he's learning to heal because of you. Jolly shook his head, not believing. Keisha heard footsteps behind her. Dami stood in the doorway, frozen, his face pale. He'd heard everything. You have a choice, Keisha said, looking back at Dami. You can hide him again, bend the story, control the narrative, protect yourself. She turned back to Jolly. Or you can show the world what I already know, that he's not your shame. He's your son. The room went silent. Dami stared at Jolly, at his tears, his fear, his belief that he was something to be ashamed of. And Dami understood. This was the moment, the real one. Hide forever. Or face the truth. The press conference was scheduled for noon. By 11:30, the front lawn of the Kane estate looked like a war zone. News vans lined the driveway. Cameras on tripods aimed at the podium like weapons. Reporters jostled for position. Makeup artists touching up anchors. Producers barking into headsets. Inside, Dami's board members sat in the front row, stone-faced and expectant. They'd been promised damage control, denial, a return to business as usual. His publicist stood ready with prepared remarks. His lawyers flanked the exits. Everything was controlled, contained, safe. Dami stood backstage, alone, staring at the speech in his hands. Every word carefully crafted to protect his image, to minimize, to spin, to hide. His hands were shaking. You don't have to read that. He turned. Keisha stood behind him, Jolly in his wheelchair beside her. What are you doing here? Dami's voice was barely a whisper. I told you to keep him inside. He wanted to come. Keisha's expression was calm, steady. He deserves to be part of this. It's his story too. Dami looked at his son. Jolly sat upright, dressed in clean clothes, his hair combed, nervous but present, choosing to be seen. I can't, Dami started. Yes, you can. Keisha stepped closer. You just have to decide who you want to be. The man who hides behind speeches that are written by lawyers, or the father your son needs. The 1-minute warning came over the speaker. Dami looked at the speech, then at Jolly. He made his choice. The crowd hushed when Dami walked to the podium. Cameras clicked like mechanical insects. Reporters leaned forward. Board members watched with barely concealed impatience. Dami stood behind the microphone, the speech still in his hand. Then he set it down. He turned back toward the entrance, nodded once. Keisha wheeled Jolly out into the sunlight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras exploded with flashes. The silence that followed was deafening. Jolly sat beside his father, visible to the world for the first time in 7 years. Dami's voice, when he spoke, was quiet, unsteady, but clear. This is Julian Kane, my son, my only son. The cameras never stopped flashing, but Dami didn't look at them. He looked at Jolly. For 7 years, I told myself I was protecting him from a cruel world, from judgment, from pity, from people who would see him as less than whole. He paused, his voice breaking. I was lying. I was protecting myself from my own guilt, my own failure, my own shame. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. The publicist looked horrified. Dami didn't care. He is not my shame. His voice grew stronger. He is the reason I must become the father I never was. Then Dami did something no one expected. He stepped away from the microphone, walked to where Jolly sat, and knelt, in front of the cameras, in front of the world, on his knees before his son. Julian, his voice was raw, broken, human. I'm sorry. I failed you in every way a father can fail. I let my guilt turn into a prison, and I locked you inside it. I told myself I was protecting you when I was only protecting myself from the truth. Tears streamed down his face. He didn't wipe them away. But I'm done hiding. I'm done running. I'm here now, if you'll let me. The world held its breath. Jolly looked at his father, really looked at him. 7 years of loneliness, isolation, and pain lived in that gaze. 7 years of believing he was unloved, unwanted, a mistake. His hands trembled on the armrests. Then, with everything he had, with every ounce of strength in his body, Jolly spoke. I forgive you, Dad. The words were halting, broken, beautiful. Dami collapsed forward, his forehead resting against Jolly's knees, shoulders shaking with sobs he had held back for 7 years. And Jolly, slowly, tentatively, reached down and touched his father's head. The cameras captured everything. The breakdown, the vulnerability, the raw, unscripted humanity. But for the first time in his life, Dami didn't care who was watching. 3 months later, the East Wing didn't exist anymore. Dami had ordered it demolished. Every wall that had separated Jolly from the rest of the house, torn down. In its place, a bright, open suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. Sunlight poured in from dawn to dusk. Jolly's new room had bookshelves he could reach, a desk positioned by the window, curtains he could open himself. It looked like a place where someone actually lived. He was in therapy now, physical, occupational, speech. 3 times a week, specialists came to the estate, and slowly, steadily, Jolly was finding his voice again. Not just words, himself. Keisha was no longer the maid. Her old uniform hung forgotten in a closet. Now she was family, Jolly's advocate, his companion, the person who had fought for him when no one else would. Dami had stepped back from his company. Not completely. He still held board meetings, still made decisions, but he'd stopped living there. Presence over power, Keisha had said, and for the first time in his life, he understood what that meant. Dinner had become a nightly ritual. The three of them sat at a small table in the breakfast room, not the massive formal dining hall, but somewhere warm, human-sized. Tonight, Jolly was trying to cut his own chicken. His hands shook with effort, the fork slipping twice. Frustration creased his face. Dami reached over quietly. "May I help?" Jolly nodded. Dami cut the pieces small, his movements patient and careful. No servants, no delegation, just a father helping his son. Jolly managed a small smile. Thank you, Dad." The word still sounded new, unpracticed, but it was there. Keisha watched them, warmth blooming in her chest. Then Jolly knocked over his water glass. Water spread across the table. For a split second, panic flashed in Jolly's eyes. The old fear of doing something wrong. But Dami just laughed, actually laughed. "Well," he said, grabbing a napkin, "that's what tablecloths are for." Jolly's panic melted into surprised laughter. Keisha joined in. It was messy, imperfect, normal. It was everything. After they'd cleaned up, Dami looked at Keisha across the table. "You broke every rule I made." "Because your rules were keeping everyone prisoners," Keisha replied gently, "including you. I owe you everything." "No," Keisha shook her head. "You owe Jolly everything. I just opened a door." Later, Dami found Keisha on the terrace, looking out at the garden where Jolly often sat now. "I don't know what this is," Dami said quietly. "What we are." Keisha turned to him. "We're two people who fought for a boy who deserved better. That's enough for now." But there was something unspoken in the air between them. Something neither was ready to name yet. Something growing. Dami nodded slowly. "For now." The next morning, Keisha stood in the doorway watching the garden. Jolly sat in his wheelchair in the sunlight, his face tilted toward the sky, eyes closed, feeling the warmth on his skin like it was the first time. Maybe it was. Dami walked out and sat on the bench beside him, not hovering, not distant, just present. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jolly reached out, slowly, hesitantly. Dami saw the movement, and without hesitation, he took his son's hand, held it, didn't let go. Keisha watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. They were not a family built by blood or wealth. They were built from the rubble of shame, the courage to defy, and the terrifying redemptive power of being truly seen. They were broken. They were healing. They were finally home. If you believe every person deserves to be seen, no matter how long they've been hidden, subscribe, like, share this story, because everyone locked away deserves someone brave enough to open the door. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you were too broken to love, if you've ever needed someone brave enough to open the door, this story was for you. You're not alone, and you deserve to be seen. Drop a comment and tell me, who in your life refused to give up on you? Who opened the door when everyone else walked away? I'll be reading every single one. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe, because you're part of this family now.